So next up in this whole variable controlled content navigation, what have you, is the idea of not leaving, right? So this is when you get into your tabbed interaction aspects. This is something that we do quite a bit. And again, in Storyline, it's quite easy to do because of the way that the triggers are set up. Here in Storyline, it's a little different, Captivate, it's a little bit different. And let me just show you. So here, what we're going to do is instead of navigating to those slides, I just have a box here with some content, and I actually went ahead and named it content, right? So not a big deal there. And it has states, so I'm going to go to the state view. So instead of jumping around and all that stuff, I'm just going to go ahead and display the content that I have here and not leave, which does make things a little bit more difficult. I still want to make sure that this is hidden, right? Okay, we're good. So now I still need that advanced action, okay? And let me see what it says here. I just need to change it a little bit. So I'm still going to stick with this for now. I'm just going to say go ahead and assign rules with visited. But I don't want to jump to the slide. I want to change state of. And I want to change the state of content to, let's see, this is rules. So rules. I'm going to say update action. So that's okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to regs. What? I did save it. Rules clicked, update action. Okay, great. Right. So assign regs with visit, I'm still going to keep it there. And then again, I just want to go ahead and say change state of content to, and that's regs. So update action. Okay. So that still stays the same, right? So what's cool is this still says rules, rules clicked. This still says regulations, regulations clicked. I'm not moving, right? I'm just going to have content show up here now. And you can see I'm still doing this execute advanced action of the show next one, right? So in theory, you would think this would work. If these are both visited, that's show next. But again, this is on enter. So if we go ahead and just say preview, and I'm just going to say next few slides, we're going to go ahead and preview this. And we've just executed the on enter, right? So on enter, that's been executed. So now when I click on rules, you can see that it changed, right? So this is the state within my content. And then I click on the other one. This is the state within my content. I didn't leave the screen. You can see both of those variables are updated. See that? They both say visited, but I don't have my continue button. Nothing's popped up. And you know that because they weren't visited. When that script first ran, right? So on enter, when that first script ran, neither of these were visited, and it only runs once. It doesn't continue to run. So we need to now figure out how we can get these to kind of keep checking, right? And the idea here with Captivate is you need to keep checking with an action. There needs to be something that is a catalyst to checking some code, right? So on enter only happens once, so we can't do that. So I'm going to have to go ahead and change the on enter to nothing here. I'm just going to say, what is it, no action? No action, no action, yeah. And now I'm going to have to kind of put everything on these buttons. And I want to do that using a counter variable. This is a great, very clever way of doing gated content, gated navigation, and whatnot within Captivate. And we're going to do it with a counter using numbers, so that way you could reuse this. Now, there's some flaws to this, okay? But at least you're going to have kind of a baseline and then adapt from there. And to do that, goodness gracious, if you're going to have a counter, I'm going to go ahead and delete these. That's not true, actually. I'm going to keep as a whole, and instead of saying that, rules and regs, I'm going to say counter. Okay, there we go, counter. Counter. Okay. And if I made a variable, it's not just going to automatically appear, right? So I have to get that darn thing in the system, add new, and I'm going to do a counter. Now, one thing with Captivate, I believe we discussed this before, but I want to make sure. So counter is going to be numbers, right? We're literally going to be counting. And you can see here that this value is empty. We left it empty with rules, with regs. If we do not put a number in this value aspect, Captivate's not going to know that you want to do any type of addition. They're just going to do like a number string, okay? So if you want to do numbers and you're using numbers at all in Captivate, you need to establish that it's in fact looking for numbers by putting a 0 in the value. By putting a 0 in there, it's going to be looking for numbers after that. So just go ahead and save it, counter 0, close. And what we want to do now is really add to that counter variable. So everything that we have on this button right now is how we want it, right? We definitely want to change this state of stuff and things, but now we don't want to assign rules with visited. We want to assign, or in another term you'll see in a second, we want to add 1 to counter, okay? And you have options when you're trying to do something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. One thing that you can see is I scroll down here, it's called increment, okay? That's definitely something you can do. You click on increment, then you see the variable that I want, which is counter, and then I can say 1. You can absolutely do that. But I want to suggest if you're going to use this in the future, if you're going to try to understand counter variables and whatnot, I want you to use what's called the expression, okay? And I'm going to do that by going to expression, okay? Because now it's looking for a math problem, right? So I'm going to say expression. And they're going to say, well, what expression is it that you want? And then just talk yourself through it. So I'm going to say, hey, Captivate, go get that counter variable, okay? And then once you have that variable, I want you to go ahead and add 1 to it. And this works out because now I'm going to say, expression, get that counter variable, and then add 1 to it. This absolutely helps out because it might not be, well, it could be 15, it could be 12. This just allows you to actually do an expression of adding to it, okay? And again, I want to make sure that stuff like this is up there. So I'm going to do my expression first. So expression, counter equals counter plus 1. We good? Okay. Update action. Okay. And then I'm just going to jump over to the regs and do the same thing. So instead of just assigning here, I'm going to do an expression. Expression equals counter plus 1. Okay. One thing I want to point out is you saw that by default the plus sign was actually selected. It's not going to consider itself a complete expression until you actually click on that and choose the plus sign. Okay. So regs, all that stuff. Okay. Update action. Okay. Close. So now we're good. There's my counter variable. Here's my content that I know is going to change based on clicking these. And essentially what I want to say here is I have 2 items. So when we first start looking at this, what we're thinking of saying is if that counter variable is equal to 2, show this button here, right? So let's just make sure everything's working first. Okay, so there's rules. So you went up to 1 up there, changed my state. Now we're at 2. Change my state, everything's good to go. Okay, so we know that's working. Close that. But now, where the heck do we put it, right? So we're under this impression of we want to say, if that counter variable is equal to 2, go ahead and show my continue button. That's definitely something that we want to do. But where? We know we can't do it on enter, because if we did it on enter, it would only run once that first time, and then we wouldn't be able to refer back to it, okay? So what we need to do is start thinking about, well, what the heck are we going to be clicking on that could trigger some code? And of course, that's these buttons here, right? So that's what we have to do. We have to jump back into this advanced action, and we want to say what? We want to say if the counter variable is equal to 2, show the continue button, right? So that means it's conditional. So I'm just going to head and click on this conditional tab. And everything is good, right? So I'm going to say if the variable counter, oh geez, is equal to, let's say literal 2, show, and I think I would have called it regs, there we go, regs continue, okay? Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, okay? Because even if it is equal to 2, I still need to do things, right? I still need it to, at minimum, change the state so I can actually read that. I still need it to update that counter. But the thing about it is, if you look at what's happening here, is I'm saying only if that counter variable is equal to 2 will these things happen, okay? But the problem is I still need things to happen even if it's not equal to 2, just because it's a regular content area, right? And that's where else comes into it. So hey Captivate, if counter is not equal to 2 and you can't do this, what else should you do? And that's where this else comes in, right? And actually I'm going to copy and paste here because I still want these two to happen, right? Is it this one? Copy and then else paste. Okay? So let's read through this. If counter is equal to 2, at minimum, do all of these things, but of course I want to show that. But if it's not, right? So there's a pretty good chance if I click on that first, it's not going to be equal to 2. Do this stuff, okay? Okay, so I'm just going to say rules clicked, okay. I'm going to say update action. Okay. Now, because I got, and I'm just going to go through this again, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to come over here and say regs clicked, right? So regs clicked is the same thing, right? Regs clicked, change this to regs. And I need to say if, right? So now I need to have that catalyst in which are these buttons. So if counter is equal to 2, show that. So of course I need to be conditional. I'm going to do that. So if the variable counter is equal to, literal, 2, I still want that expression to happen. I still want to change the state of, but then of course I want to show regs next. Oh, regs continue, sorry. And again, if I click on regulations first, that is not going to be equal to 2, right? So I still need stuff to happen. And all this stuff down here is only going to happen if that's equal to 2. So that's when I can jump down here over to my else, and I can still have that stuff happen, okay? So I'm going to say update action. Close this, make sure everything is here. So rules clicked, regulation click, okay? There's my counter. Now, a little premonition, this is not going to work, and we'll figure out why here in a moment. And I should, as a disclaimer, I mean, I'm only doing 2 just to kind of facilitate this screencast, but just remember, you're probably going to have more, right? So if you do some sort of menu items and all that stuff, you could have more, which is fine. So here we go. We can slightly see my 0. I click on, I'll even do regulations first. Okay, so regulations happened. Got my state changed. It went to visited, and then it went up to 1. Then I'm going to click on rules, and it went up to 2. But I don't have my continue button, right? Why not? And then what it really boils down to is, let me go ahead and say, let me just restart this thing. You have to remember what I'm saying. If that counter up here is equal to 2, show that. But I'm saying it has to be equal to 2 when they're clicking this, right? So if I click button 1, it is equal to 1. When I click this, it's equal to 2, but it doesn't come equal to 2 until after I click the button. So my code has a flaw, right? And I combat that. Oh, hang on, let me just show you this one last time then, if you think about it. Hey, what's happening? Did I hit publish? Yeah, I don't want to do that. Just to show you that the code is in fact working, it's just not the way that we have it structured. 1, 2. But if I go to click again, my continue came up. See that? And that's because when I clicked on it that second time, or in this case, the third time, I did satisfy that condition because it was equal to 2 when I clicked, okay? But that's not what we want to do. We don't want to add that extra click to stuff and things. What we want to do is jump into this now. And we don't want to say is equal to, right? So if the counter is equal to 2, it's not working. So we jump in here and we're looking at these things and we say, is equal to, no. Not equal to, no. It's greater than is an option, but I like doing this one here, greater than or equal to. And if you think about it, I have 2 items, okay? So if I click on 1, my number is 1, and I want it to work after they have to satisfy that one. So I want to say if it's greater than equal to 1, okay? Update action. I'm going to go over here to regs clicked. Same thing. Greater or equal to literal 1. Okay, so all I did was update that. And we should be good. So now I'm going to preview this. Okay. Right now, again, if you see up there, my counter is 0. Absolute 0. Click on rules. Now it's 1. See that? So it went up to 1, and everything is okay. Now when I click on this, if you remember, my code says greater than or equal to 1, which makes sense because by clicking on this, I've now satisfied and looked at both of those areas. My counter is in fact greater than or equal to 1, and now I can continue on because my continue button's there and it showed up. And really it just boils down to that variance of 1. So if I had, let's say if I had 9 buttons on here, I could keep everything exactly the same, right? But my code would say, let me think about it, it's just 1 less. If you had 9 buttons, it would say counter is greater than or equal to 8. That way they can click in any order they want, and by the time they get to 8, that 9th one means they've gone to that content, and then everything will show as they want, okay? So that is when you're messing around on the slide and not going anywhere. You can see it gets a little bit more complicated. There are some flaws to this, right? But at the same token, having that baseline really kind of solidifies some stuff and things. So you're good. Okay? Thank you.